There's a person in your neighborhood that every bird trusts. You've seen them. They walk outside and within seconds, birds appear. Cardinals land on nearby branches. Chickadees hover close. Robins continue feeding while this person stands just feet away. And you've wondered, what do they have that I don't? The answer is more complex and more fascinating than you think. Because birds are not choosing people randomly. They are making calculated decisions based on evolutionary algorithms that have been refined over thousands of generations. And what they're evaluating is not what most people assume. Welcome back to Backyard Bird Mind. If you're new here, subscribe, because today we're walking through the exact criteria birds use to assess human trustworthiness. We're going to cover the science behind first impressions in birds, how long it takes for a bird to decide you're safe, what behaviors trigger immediate rejection, and the one thing you can do that will make almost any bird reconsider its entire assessment of you. Stay with me to the end because the final point involves something most people do without realizing it, and it is the single fastest way to lose a bird's trust permanently. Birds do not trust easily. That is the starting point. For tens of thousands of years, the birds that trusted large animals too quickly were the birds that got eaten. The ones that survived were cautious, suspicious, and highly sensitive to threat signals. That wariness is hardwired. It is not something you can bypass with good intentions. But here's what most people miss. Birds are not evaluating whether you are dangerous in some absolute sense. They are evaluating whether you are predictable. Predictability and safety are the same thing to a bird. An unpredictable human is a human whose behavior cannot be modeled, and anything that cannot be modeled is treated as a potential threat until proven otherwise. Research from the University of Exeter, published in the journal Animal Behavior, demonstrated this in controlled experiments. Wild robins were exposed to two groups of humans. One group followed a strict routine, appearing at the same time, in the same location, performing the same actions every day. The other group appeared randomly at different times in different locations, doing different things. Within 2 weeks, the robins in the first group were feeding within arm's reach of the humans. The robins in the second group maintained a flight distance of over 10 meters, even after a month. The variable was not the humans themselves. It was the predictability of their behavior. What this means for you is simple but requires discipline. If you want the birds in your yard to trust you, you need to become boring. You need to establish a routine and stick to it. Same time, same door, same path to the feeder, same speed of movement, same posture. Every deviation from that pattern is processed as new information, and new information resets the trust calculation. This is why people who work from home and go outside at the same time every morning to drink coffee often report that birds seem unusually comfortable around them. It is not magic. It is pattern recognition. The birds have observed hundreds of iterations of the same behavior and concluded that this particular human is safe because this particular human is predictable. But predictability is only the first filter. The second filter is threat signaling. And this is where most people fail without knowing it. Birds are extraordinarily sensitive to body language, and the signals they are reading are not the ones you think. You assume that if you move slowly and stay quiet, you are signaling non-threat. That is partially true, but there is a more important signal you are likely sending without realizing it. And it is one of the most powerful threat indicators in the animal kingdom: eye contact. Direct sustained eye contact is how predators target prey. A hawk does not look away from a sparrow. A cat does not look away from a mouse. Predators lock on. And when you look directly at a bird, especially when you are walking toward it, you are replicating that predatory gaze. The bird does not interpret this as curiosity. It interprets it as targeting. Research from the University of Bristol examined how different bird species responded to human gaze direction. In every species tested, birds allowed humans to approach significantly closer when the human was looking away or at the ground, compared to when the human was making direct eye contact. The difference was dramatic. In some cases, the allowed approach distance doubled when eye contact was avoided. What this means practically is that if you want birds to trust you, you need to stop looking at them. Or more precisely, you need to look at them indirectly. Peripheral vision, brief glances, never a sustained stare. This feels counterintuitive because you want to watch the birds. You want to see them up close. But the act of watching them is the act that keeps them distant. The people who are most successful at habituating wild birds are often people who are doing something else: reading, gardening, sitting quietly with a book. The birds are not the focus of their attention, and that lack of focus is precisely what makes them approachable. The third filter is sound. Birds are listening to you, and they are making judgments based on what they hear. Loud, sudden noises are obvious disqualifiers. A slammed door, a shout, a dropped object, all of these trigger immediate flight responses. But there is a more subtle auditory signal that affects trust, and it is one that most people produce constantly without thinking about it: vocal tone. Research published in biology letters show that birds habituated to human presence could distinguish between calm vocal tones and agitated vocal tones, even when the words being spoken were identical. Birds approached feeders more quickly and stayed longer when humans spoke in low, slow, steady tones. They hesitated or left when the same humans spoke in higher, faster, more erratic tones. The interpretation is that birds are using vocal tone as a proxy for emotional state, and emotional state as a proxy for behavioral predictability. A calm human is a human engaged in low-energy, non-threatening activity. An agitated human is a human whose next action is less predictable and, therefore, more dangerous. If you talk to yourself while you are outside, if you greet the birds, if you narrate what you are doing, keep your voice low and steady. The content does not matter. The prosody does. Birds are not parsing your words. They are parsing your emotional state through the acoustic features of your speech. And if those features signal stress, arousal, or unpredictability, the birds will maintain distance no matter how many times you have followed your routine. The fourth filter is space, and this is where trust becomes measurable. Every bird has a flight initiation distance, the minimum distance at which it will tolerate a human before fleeing. That distance is not fixed. It changes based on accumulated experience. A bird that has observed you hundreds of times, always performing the same safe, predictable actions, will allow you to approach much closer than a bird that has only seen you a few times. But here's the critical insight. You cannot force this process. If you approach a bird too closely, too soon, you do not just fail to build trust, you actively set the process back. The bird recalibrates. It updates its model of you to include the information that you violated its space. And space violation is a predatory behavior. Once that recalibration happens, it can take weeks to undo. The people who succeed at building trust with wild birds are the people who let the bird set the distance. You establish your routine. You appear in the same place at the same time doing the same things, and you let the bird decide when to come closer. In some cases, this happens quickly. In other cases, it takes months. But the timeline is not under your control. What is under your control is whether you respect the bird's boundary or violate it. Respecting it builds trust incrementally. Violating it erases weeks of progress in seconds. The fifth filter is the one that most people never consider, and it is the one that determines whether a bird will move from tolerance to active approach. Food is the obvious variable. If you provide food consistently, birds will associate you with a resource, and that association accelerates trust. But food alone is not enough. There are people who fill feeders daily and never achieve close contact with birds. There are other people who rarely provide food, but have birds landing on their shoulders. The difference is not the food. The difference is whether the human has learned to send the correct calming signals. And the most powerful calming signal is stillness. Not just slow movement, stillness. Complete, sustained, non-reactive stillness. When a bird approaches you and you freeze, you are sending a signal that you have no interest in the bird as a target. Predators do not freeze. Predators react. They turn their heads, they shift their weight, they prepare to strike. A human who becomes completely still in the presence of a bird is a human exhibiting non-predatory behavior at the deepest, most instinctual level. Research on habituated chickadees and nuthatches has shown that these species, which are already relatively bold, will land on humans who remain perfectly still significantly more often than humans who are merely moving slowly. The birds are testing. They approach, pause, watch for a reaction. If the human moves even slightly, the test fails. If the human remains frozen, the bird moves closer. This is why people who meditate outdoors, people who sit motionless for long periods, often report unusually close encounters with birds. It is not that the birds are drawn to the person's energy or presence, it is that the person is producing the behavioral signal that in the bird's evolutionary history has always meant safe. The sixth filter is the one that undoes everything, and it is the one most people do not realize they are doing. Inconsistent behavior. You have been predictable for weeks. You have avoided eye contact. You have kept your voice calm. You have respected distance. The birds have started to trust you, and then one day you rush. You are late. You move quickly. You make noise. You break the pattern. The birds notice, and they recalculate. Because inconsistency is the signature of danger. Predators are inconsistent. They lie in wait, then strike. They appear calm, then attack. A human who is predictable 99 times and unpredictable once is a human who has just revealed that their behavior is not as reliable as it seemed. And in the evolutionary math of survival, one instance of unpredictability outweighs 100 instances of predictability. This is why building trust with wild birds is so fragile. It is not that birds do not remember you. They do. It is that they are continuously updating their assessment, and every new data point is weighted. If you want birds to trust you, you cannot afford inconsistency. You need to be the same person every time, same routine, same energy, same signals. Because the moment you are not, the trust you have built begins to erode. The seventh and final point is the one that most people find hardest to accept, but it is the most important. You cannot trust a bird into trusting you. Trust is not given. It is earned through time, repetition, and the absence of threat. There is no shortcut. There is no technique that bypasses the process. The birds in your yard are running a calculation every time they see you, and that calculation is based on thousands of generations of evolutionary pressure. The birds that trusted too easily died. The birds that trusted too slowly starved. The ones that survived were the ones who calibrated trust at exactly the right speed, and their descendants are the birds in your yard right now. If you have been trying to get birds to trust you and it is not working, the answer is not to try harder. The answer is to become more predictable, more still, more patient. The birds are already watching you. They are already learning. The question is not whether they will trust you. The question is whether you will give them enough consistent, non-threatening data to make that trust rational. There is one more thing worth understanding, and it sits at the intersection of all 7 filters: context. Birds do not evaluate you in isolation. They evaluate you relative to other humans they have encountered. If you live in an area where people frequently chase birds, throw things at them, or allow dogs to run loose in yards, the baseline trust level for all humans in that area drops. Your birds are starting from a position of higher wariness because the collective human behavior in their territory has taught them to be wary. Conversely, if you live in an area where people are generally calm, predictable, and non-threatening, your birds are starting from a higher baseline of trust. You inherit the reputation of your neighborhood. This has practical implications. If you move to a new house and the previous owner was someone who scared birds or neglected feeders, you are not starting from zero. You are starting from negative. The birds remember the house, the location, the general pattern of human activity there, and they have already formed expectations. Changing those expectations requires more time and more consistency than building trust from scratch. But it is possible. Birds update their models continuously. A house that was once a threat zone can become a safe zone. It just takes longer. And here's the final insight that ties everything together. The birds in your yard are not waiting for you to prove you are trustworthy in some abstract moral sense. They're waiting for you to prove you are boring. Boring in the best possible way. Predictable, non-reactive, consistent, calm. The same person, doing the same thing in the same way, over and over. Because in a world full of variables, in an environment where a single mistake can be fatal, boring is the highest compliment a wild bird can give you. If you have had a bird land on you, if you have had that moment where a wild animal chose to be near you, tell me about it in the comments. How long did it take? What were you doing at the time? And if this video changed the way you think about trust, share it. Because sometimes the most profound relationships are the ones that are built slowly, quietly, and without expectation.